Okay, so we're going to get started. While everybody's logging on, I'm going to start with reviewing why we're here today. So you should all be seeing my screen right now. So I'll start with a poem. I know it is possible for leaders to use their power and influence, their insight and compassion to lead people back to an understanding of who we are as human beings, to create the conditions for our basic human qualities of generosity, contribution, community, and love to be evoked no matter what. I know it is possible to experience grace and joy in the midst of tragedy and loss. I know it is possible to create islands of sanity in the midst of wildly disruptive seas. I know it is possible because I've worked with leaders over many years in places that knew chaos and breakdown long before this moment. And I have studied enough history to know that such leaders always arise when they are most needed. Now it's our turn. So that poem is by Meg Wheatley. And for those of you that are still logging on, I'd like to invite you to introduce yourselves in the chat window if you haven't already. Your name, where you are, if you're working from home or not, and if you have kids. So the intention for this meeting is threefold. One, to create a space where we can sense our changing system and derive meaning from what we are collectively sensing. Two, to cultivate courageous leadership in all of us that ripples out into our community. Three, to be open to transform and to be transformed. The agenda for today will start with the grounding and some housekeeping. I will then move on to a few points that I'd like to seed in terms of setting the intention and the ground rules, as well as the purpose for why we're here. We'll then move into breakout conversations. So there'll be 15 minutes of breakout conversations in groups of 3 or 4. And we'll come back together at the end to synthesize and make meaning from what we've discussed and come up with. So thank you all for being here. For those of you, again, that are just getting logged on still, please introduce yourselves in the chat window. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Kelly McDicken, who Kelly is helping me out. She's waving her hand. Kelly's helping me as a co-host. Hey, Kelly. So Kelly's helping me. So if anybody has any logistical questions or technical difficulties while we're talking, please feel free to message Kelly and she will help you. So thank you, Kelly, for doing that.
No problem. Yeah, and you can switch the two to my name if you want to just message me directly or put it in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on it.
Excellent. So before we get into the main content for today, I wanted to just go over a few housekeeping items. So I am recording this call for any people that may want to join this community later down the road and see what we covered today. Only the part where we're together will be recorded. The breakout sessions will not be recorded. So those will be confidential and private. We have a link to a survey. So Kelly is going to post a link into the chat window, and I'm going to go ahead and just give you a snapshot of what this survey is. So as you saw from the invitation, this meeting is very much an experiment and intended to be community driven. So the topics that we discuss, I want the topics to be decided by you and this community that is coming together. So Kelly's created a survey where you can enter topics that you'd like to discuss in future meetings. And I actually took the liberty of already putting a lot of topics that I have been thinking about that are important to me. And what we can do here is we can add topics and we can also upvote existing topics. So if you wanted to talk about political organizing, for example, you could upvote that, and then we'll aggregate all of the things we want to talk about and decide where this community goes. So the link for that is in the chat window. The next housekeeping item is an invitation to participate on the design team. So right now, Kelly's on the design team, Keiko, a few others have expressed interest in helping facilitate and design these sessions. We'd like to have rotating speakers. So if you're interested in speaking or joining the design team, please email me or reach out to me and let me know. We would love to have you help. And then the final housekeeping item is we will be saving the notes from the chat window into a Google Doc and then sharing that Google document back with you. So we have a running document of everything that we discuss and the data that we collect and the stories that we tell. So if you are not on the meeting invite or I don't have your email address, please make sure I have your email address so that you can stay on the distribution for that Google Doc. Okay, so that's it for the housekeeping items. The very first thing we're going to do is set some norms and ground rules for how we will be conducting ourselves through this community gathering and this community circle. So I'd like to get us started with a couple of ground rules, and then I'd like to invite you to share your own norms and ground rules in the chat window, and we will compile those into a living document of norms that we'd like to use to conduct ourselves by. So the first ground rule is I really want this space to be one that's light and fun. There's a lot of seriousness out there in the world, and we're going to be talking about serious topics. However, things are really messy right now. They're messy for me, as I know they are for you. I have kids that may come in at any time. I am trying this Zoom breakout thing for the first time. So if we make mistakes, which inevitably will happen, I'd like you to invite me in doing hands in the air or a clown bow. Clown bow. So the norm is that this will be messy and we will suspend judgment and be kind to one another to help us get through the conversations in a loving way. So let's see. I'd like to invite you all to share any other norms in the chat window, and I will go ahead and read them out based on what we're seeing. Okay, excellent. Funductive. I have to ask you, Pat, what that means.
It's the combination of fun and productive.
All right, I love it.
Because I'd like to, not just check in, but learn stuff that is actionable. But I am also a very playful person. Hi, Steve Byers. And I would love to have fun as we get to know each other.
Excellent. I love it. So please, as we go through this meeting, continue to document your norms in the chat window and we will compile them. So I'm going to dig straight into the agenda for today. So my ultimate why for bringing this group of people together is that really what's at stake for me is so much bigger than just me. I actually was quite nervous about starting a weekly gathering, nervous about the time commitment, nervous if I'm able to really contribute what I want to contribute. But I went ahead and I did this anyway, because for me, it's about this moment in time within the context of so much more. And I have my kids at home with me, as I'm sure so many of you do. I'm thinking about my parents and how vulnerable they are. And so when I think about this within the context of those that came before us and those that will come after us, it's really important to me that we collectively spend the time and the right amount of care considering the meaning of this moment and acting in a way that is intentional and kind and from a place of love and not from fear. So the first thing that I want to talk about is sensing the system. So that was the very first intention when we came together. And there's so many signals right now at so many levels. Like when I think about what I'm seeing happening on social media, in the news, in my community, it feels like there's so much information and it's really hard to know what to pay attention to. I'd like to use the metaphor of tuning into a channel. And I'm thinking about like what channel you tune into really influences how you're feeling and what you're seeing and what you're sensing. Some channels I've been tuning into have made me uncomfortable. Like I had to take a break from the news last week because it was too much, and I chose to tune out of that channel. But I just thought it was really interesting to think about what channel we tune into informs our reality. And if I do turn the news off, what am I missing? So I would like to invite us all to think about what channels we are tuning into and what we're sensing within those channels. And also what channels are not being broadcast right now. There are a lot of people that are offline, that are underrepresented, that don't have access. And so I'd like to invite you to think about the channels you're tuning into and the channels that you're not. So I'm going to share a few photos based off of things that I am sensing in the system, just to prompt some discussion. And I'd like to just provoke some thoughts based off of what I'm sensing in the system. So, stand by. So I've been tuning into a few different channels, and I am seeing in my community channel, so I'm connected to a community of artists and musicians, many of whom have lost their jobs and are not able to really work, and rent was due yesterday. And so I saw this picture shared of a rent strike on 4/1. I also am tuning into a channel that shows some of the local businesses that are boarded up, and the calls upon our policymakers and those that are leading us to freeze mortgages, to provide food for those who need it right now. I'm also tuning into a channel of artists and creatives who are now finding themselves urged to express themselves somehow through art and creativity, and turning what's happening out there into something of beauty. And some of this art being painted on the boarded up businesses in Seattle is really quite lovely, as we try to find beauty among everything that's happening right now. So I'm tuned into a channel of DJs, and this group, there's a woman in this group who very quickly, almost immediately, started assembling a living document of community resources for the DJ and musician community in Seattle, which was so lovely to see. And this community resource guide includes a lot of things like resources on grants and different types of financial assistance available to people who don't have it right now. It includes information on mosque building, activities, mosque building collaborations. It includes how to do a live stream and to share your art in the virtual world. I also thought this was kind of cool. So as we're talking a lot about mosques right now and how much they may or may not be necessary, there are folks in my innovation channel and in my business entrepreneurial channel who are really thinking about designing for those that have less representation. So this was kind of cool, for a mosque for the deaf and hard of hearing. I also tuned into a channel, again, in my business and innovation channel, the upside of a downturn, how to reposition your business now to win big when the crisis ends. This really made me think about the fear that's out there, and the fear that's spurring people to think about how to provide for their families and how to jumpstart the economy. I couldn't help but feel there was a dark thread in this, an overtone of fear. And then this in my humor channel, because we have to laugh, at the beginning of my pregnancy, I made a conscious effort to switch to green cleaning products. Today, I used a Lysol wipe on an apple. I thought that was kind of funny too. And again, like finding humor in what's happening around us, but this undertone of something quite serious and something that makes us afraid. And it certainly makes me afraid. And then finally, on the global channel, this graffiti, which was seen in a Hong Kong subway station, that reads, "We can't return to normal because the normal we had was precisely the problem." So I wanted to share those images with you to seed you to start thinking about the channels that you are tuning into, what you are paying attention to, and what you're sensing, what you're hearing, what you're seeing through those channels. I would also like to invite you to think about the channels that you're tuning into and why, and to notice if any of what you're choosing to tune in or tune out is coming from a place of fear or discomfort. One thing I'm glaringly aware of right now is that my privilege allows me to choose what channels I tune into. And there's a lot of people right now who don't have this choice. There's also a lot being shared. So when I think about that Hong Kong subway station fun, about how the normal that we had was part of the problem, it really for me brought up this notion of what's happening right now. This global event lives in all of our collective unconscious as a shared experience now. And how interesting it is that globally we are all experiencing the same event. And this shared experience does now connect all of us. And so what I see here is a shift. There's an opportunity for a shift in thinking, a shift in consciousness, but only if we have the courage to lead, the courage to tune into the channels that we want to tune into, and the courage to transform and be transformed by it. I also think it's really important not to numb away the discomfort that we may feel, which brings me back to the second intention of this meeting, which is to cultivate courageous leadership. And so before we go into our breakouts, I'd like to invite you to just meditate with me for a minute and ground ourselves in our bodies and to sit with our feelings, whatever they might be. I'd like to acknowledge that many of us are feeling so many things right now. And I would like to invite you to show up here in this safe space with whatever truth is real for you right now. Sitting with our feelings will be a source of grounding and acknowledgement for what is. So I'd like to invite you to close your eyes if you'd like to, and start with a deep cleansing breath. First, recognize what you're feeling. Mentally whisper it. And that will help you right away notice what that feeling is. Then allow it. Just let it be there. Don't try to run away or fix it or control it or judge it. Then investigate it. Begin to come into the body and just feel where the fear is in the body or the feeling. Find out how it feels and breathe with it, with a gentle quality of attention. And then nurture. You might just put your hand on your heart and offer a kind or soothing message to yourself. You can say to the feeling, "Thank you for trying to protect me. It's okay." So that meditation was from Tara Brach, and I'm happy to share it with you if anybody would like to see that. Let's shift into our breakouts. So before we shift into the breakouts, I will share with you. Well, first of all, I'd like to invite those of you who feel called to facilitate the breakouts. If there are any of you that would like to just lead the discussion when you break out into your groups of threes, I invite you to do so. We'd also like to invite you to take some notes. So Kelly has graciously prepared a survey link where one person from each breakout can volunteer to take notes during the breakout discussions. I'd also like to invite any of those of you who feel called to weave together any of the concepts that come up when we come back together. If you'd like to connect the dots and talk about what we're seeing and what we're hearing from our breakouts. If you feel called to do that, I'd like to invite you to do that too. So there's 2 questions for the breakouts, and we'll paste these into the chat window. The first is just your name and a sentence on how you help the world, just so you can get to know each other. And the second is, what channel are you tuning into and what are you sensing? We'll reconvene in 15 minutes. I'll be here if you need me. Okay. Welcome back. I hope that you had some enjoyable discussions. I did notice afterwards that a couple of groups had 4 people and a couple of groups had 2. So I'm sorry about that. I won't do that next time. Hands in the air. Okay, so I'd like to invite you to share. Please, whoever feels called to share what came up. I'd like to invite a couple of folks. Emily, go ahead.
I'll share. I was in a group with Liz and Laura. We're my homegirls. Hi. We had a great conversation. Liz kicked us off with a really beautiful story about tuning into a channel of a live piano music performance and feeling that uplifting of the human spirit by being able to watch people from all over the world tune in and experience something together and being positive. And just being connected to how connected we are and the beauty that's arising in this moment as well. And that really kicked us off into a great conversation about coherence and the exercise we did initially to just pause and feel into our hearts and what it's like to be, to teach coherence and lead from our hearts and seeing that the foundations that we built prior to this with our team to create cohesive teams really have helped us face this challenge better together. And just how, in terms of staying connected to a channel of thought leaders around humanizing work, staying connected to our hearts, and hoping that the behavior change that's coming from now really reverberates and continues from when we're in a more free-spirited chapter of our lives.
Lovely, thank you. Who else?
I'll go. My group was Joyce and Tiffany and Betsy and myself. We had a great time. It was fun-ductive. So we're already practicing our norms. And a lot of +1s on what Emily, you just said, with the addition, with art and exercise, and also being true to our true nature. So how not to give in to the fear even as we need to be cautious, especially if we have underlying health conditions, or children or relatives, and how to, you know, balance news with art, balance exercise with meditation, and really rediscovering our love for some of the basics like cooking and family time, and just not being so busy, and then just really underscoring the need to permanently fix so many of our broken systems that are punitive, and hoping that that will sustain after this kind of spike in political and social will and financial will, that it will sustain. And so we're kind of tuning into those opportunities.
That's beautiful. And I love the way that you express this just balance between grounding in what is and finding beauty in what is, but also this sense of being poised to transform. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Who else?
Jyoti, this is Autumn. Hi, everyone. Can you see me, hear me?
Yep.
So Keiko and I were one of the mini groups, the two of us, tiny but mighty. And Patricia, just stemming off of what you were talking about, we really spent some time talking about polarization and navigating fear, but also this tremendous like creative opportunity that we all have, and how we both individually, but then collectively as a part of our communities, are really taking the individual and greater opportunities to ground ourselves. I've been working a lot with the small business community, for example, and there's a lot of challenge and fear, but there's also just this tremendous coming together in creativity of how business and community leaders are adapting and how they're creatively taking care of each other, and that's tremendously inspiring to me personally. So it is this spectrum, and I think Keiko shared, and feel free to jump in, Keiko, you know, finding that way to ground amidst it all through the things that bring us grounding and pleasure and joy, will help move us forward.
That's beautiful. So I would love to hear from everybody else. We only have 2 minutes left, so I'd like to honor your time and just draw things back together. So please, again, keep me posted of your contact info, and we'll send out notes, and respond to the polls if you can. I'd like to invite you, if you or somebody you know you think would be a good speaker or facilitator for this session, let me know. Help would be welcome. So to close, I would like to close with another poem. So just a second while I get it up. Okay, hold on. Here it is. Okay. So this poem is by Rupi Kaur. In the darkest times, I've seen us become our brightest. Standing on balconies and singing to the empty streets below us, we managed to crack jokes in the saddest times, put the vulnerable before us, dance in hospitals to keep ourselves going, risk our bodies to heal the sick. Sometimes it takes a crisis to remember our lives depend on each other. We will end up nowhere if we try to go it alone. And while people are losing each other and people are saving each other, people are also getting to work. As the world wakes to uncertainty, canvases that sat collecting dust for the past 5 years are finally being stretched. Books are being written. Inventions are falling into little heads everywhere. Because there is nothing better to do with this time than be useful. And I can't think of a more beautiful way to pull ourselves together. I don't think there's a more human way to survive. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to invite you to come off mute And as we depart, to share a sound or a word or a thought that you're taking with you into the rest of your day.
Can I share a mantra?
Please.
So it's a 2-line mantra. It says, from untruth to truth, from darkness to light, from death to life. I am peace. Let there be peace. Om asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to do a countdown from 3. If anybody else would like to say a word, make a sound, make the sound. 3, 2, 1. Have a great rest of the day. I'll see you next week, lovelies. Goodbye.
Thank you.